Hi there, this is Matt at State of Flux here with a review for Sick. This is a Peacock original film that had hit the independent film circuit late last year to a moderate degree of success. And I can see why. This is from writer Kevin Williamson, who is the creator of Scream, having written many of those screenplays and serves as executive producer on the recent Scream installments. He kind of does his Scream thing. This is very Scream adjacent. It's pretty similar to two movies, and I'll get into spoiler territory at the end, but for now, this is the non-spoiler section of the review. This is sort of Scream for the COVID era. It is a soft satire of COVID times through the lens of a writer who appears to be frustrated with how the youth of the nation handled the COVID pandemic. And that's kind of where I'll stop. This movie is set on April 3rd, I believe, of 2020, which was the start of lockdowns and quarantines. And it follows two young people who are trying to quarantine at their family's cabin, and a killer strikes at late in the night. And the slasher elements of the film play kind of as you'd expect. There's a lot of phone play, very Scream-like, especially the first act is incredibly screamy. Kind of to the film's detriment. When it's being a slasher, it only kind of works. It's effectively well shot and it's effectively well written, but the film really comes into its own in the final act. And how you respond to that final act will be how you respond to this film. It worked for me. I thought the last 10 minutes were genius, and the last 10 minutes are very reminiscent of another very famous slasher film, and there's very obvious Easter eggs shoveled within those last remaining minutes of the movie, but I responded insanely well to the conclusion of this movie, so much so that I give this movie a very firm recommendation. Currently, it's my favorite film of 2023. That said, it's the only film of 2023 I've seen, but I do think it's a really good movie and one worth your time. In fact, I do think that this would have done very well theatrically. And I'm not sure why Peacock chose to go exclusive with streaming on this one, for I think it has a cinematic quality that would have played well. I think the eerie, atmospheric, slashery nature of the movie would have worked really well. It is atmospheric, and it is unsettling. It doesn't have a high body count, and maybe that's what they feared, but they released Halloween Ends theatrically, and that movie was bogus. This at least has some artistic merit to it and a really clever and fun subversion of expectation that leads to a great conclusion. So those are my non-spoiler thoughts. I give the movie a very, very firm 3 stars. One worth visiting, and especially if they'd sold this as From the Mind of Scream, this came out virtually 1 year to the day from when Scream 2022 came out. So I think they could have really rode the success of that and delivered a movie that would have made a moderate degree of moderate budget back this weekend alone. So anyway, I digress. 3 stars, I enjoyed it. From this point forward is going to be spoilers. So spoilers for Sick in 3, 2, 1. Sick is set in the early days of quarantine shutdown in 2020, and you're riding with 2 women who go to this cabin. One of them is very conscious of what's going on with the pandemic, very mask-focused, and the other one is very much loose because it's something that is only affecting adults, and we're young, so what? Which was very much an attitude that seemed to be shared quite often, especially when you see all those COVID parties. And COVID parties do come into play. You find out that the killer, or Urs, is a, a family of killers that is hunting down people because their beloved child died from one of these COVID parties. And the lead character in this story is an asymptomatic carrier of COVID. She is the one who gave their son COVID, which killed him, proving that it doesn't only affect older people. It affects everybody. He was not built to handle it. He died. The family masks up and exacts revenge on the title characters. And the part that tickled me on it was the movie plays very, like, the opening scene is very screamy, and then it plays very much like your kind of cabin in the woods, atmospheric kind of slasher horror movie with silent undertones of Friday the 13th that became very obvious as I was moving further and further along, specifically that first Friday the 13th, right up to the point where your lead character is running outside and gets to a car who pulls off to the side, and she's like, "Please let me in, there's a killer!" And the older woman there's like, "I can't let you in, you're not wearing a mask." And then she's like, "Here, I'll give you a mask," and she gives her a mask laced with chloroform. She is the killer, and she is the one whose son was killed. Her name is Pamela. Her son, Jason. And so the homages to Friday the 13th are very palpable in a way that I thought was pretty successful. Releasing it on Friday the 13th as well was pretty inspired. But it's subtle enough so that if you haven't seen Friday the 13th, it's not going to be a distraction or anything. It's just a nice tip of the hat for fans. But pretty much from that point forward, where she runs down the woman who ultimately is the killer, it plays out very much like the first Friday the 13th, except with this added little bit of COVID commentary. And as I say, it feels like this is a screenplay written by a person who is of a slightly older generation, or a generation of your Gen X versus your Gen Z, who is very frustrated with the Gen Z response to the COVID pandemic. And this was him working out those frustrations in a relatively thoughtful manner. It does draw attention to a very specific time. This has probably a somewhat niche market, but the COVID scenes, especially early on at the supermarket, were kind of triggering, especially to my wife. She was like, "This is messed up." She's like, "I'm just getting flooded back with these memories from just 2 years ago." But anyway, geez, 3 years ago, holy crap. But anyway, I digress. It's a movie that I quite like. I dug the Friday the 13th homages, and it is a shame. I think this would have done well theatrically. But as I said, it's a good one. I recommend. I hope you've only stuck on for the spoilery bits if you have watched the movie. And if not, just go ahead and go watch it. It's worth it. It's slick 85 minutes, and you'll have a good time. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Peace.